Thank you. I mean, it's wonderful to see so many people here who've found their purpose, and Nick, and you can see the enthusiasm and power that brings with it. And of course, Leela as well. And all the people here in Soul Sessions, really supportive, and how Eloise brings together that beautiful community and really helps people. I think Eloise is a master at seeing people's genius and nurturing that into expression. So I really want to thank Eloise. She certainly helped me a lot. So obviously I'm very excited and of course passionate to be talking about passion, purpose and power. And I imagine that you guys being here, you've probably already asked those questions like, what is my purpose in life? Why am I here? Do I have a destiny? And if I do have a destiny, how do I find it? And if I find it, how do I make it work for me so that it can bring in money and give me a lifestyle and so I can have it sustain through life? And those questions, what's the meaning of life? Do I have a purpose? They're so common in our society that they're virtually cliche. But when you're a child or when you're a teenager, you don't know those questions are cliche. You don't know anyone's ever asked them before. Those questions are burning questions that you want an answer to. And I certainly know that for me in my childhood, feeling like there was something special about me and something special I was meant to offer the world, that was really important to me because that's what I held on to. That was what allowed me to feel like there was some point in what had happened to me, because by the time I was 9 years old, my world had spiraled into absolute emotional chaos because I'd had 4 years of abuse from a family friend, and then I'd gone through an extended court case where I had to give evidence against him whilst he was there in the courtroom, because in those days there wasn't any protection with kids, so you had to stand there in a courtroom and give evidence against. And then he made an appeal and I had to go back to the Supreme Court when I thought I'd finally escaped it all. And then only a short time after that, my father died. And my father was much older than my mother, 22 years older than my mother. They had a very passionate relationship that one day I might tell a story about. So my father retired and my mother went out to work, and my father was at home all the time for me when I came home. So I had this very, very close relationship with him. And to me, I just didn't understand what was this all about. And then on top of that, I felt like I was very different. How many people here felt that? Feel like they're different. A lot of their life they didn't feel like they fitted in. And they felt a bit like a fish out of water. Haha. Laughing down here. And for me, I felt different because, one, my dad was so much older. Everyone thought he was my grandfather. My dad, who had been a brigadier general in the Second World War, he was born in India. He spent a lot of time with yogis. He was passionate about quantum physics and talking about that to me at 8. Obviously, I didn't know that people don't normally do that. Talking about yoga and mind over matter and all the yogis he'd met in India and the things that he'd seen. I can see Sita's nodding her head there. So that was different. And then my mother was a passionate intellectual. And she had a passion for Southeast Asia before anyone had ever been to Bali. My grandmother thought that Indonesia had headhunters there, and actually it did. My family background was very different, and in this intellectual family, I get born and I'm really dyslexic. So I didn't read my first book until year 6, and then all through high school I had quite a lot of trouble with reading, writing and spelling. But the great thing about the dyslexia that I had, and the gift of it, was that I had this intense, vivid imagination. And it was fantastic. And I used to visualise in 3D. So I would climb up a tree and think, okay, it's the faraway tree, where's the door? And I just felt like I could reach out and touch that door into another world. And I also was really fascinated. My dad would read me the Narnia story, so I was kind of like, wow, animals that talk, really into that. And fairies at the bottom of the garden. And And, and also this idea that here were all these kids who didn't fit in, who go into a magical world where they are special, where they become kings and queens and princes and princesses, and there's something special and some purpose for what's happened for them. And of course you can imagine how appealing that was for me, and look, it's appealing to so many people. I was just on the way here in the Powerhouse Museum seeing the Harry Potter stuff, and you just look at all those kids, the 3 kids who are the heroes of the Harry Potter stories, none of them fit in. So it's very appealing for us, this idea that, we might not fit in, and rather than our past being something that is a pathology and who we are being something that is wrong with us, that it might be a pathway to what is special about us, what is unique about us, and that might somehow lead to our destiny. I think that's a very appealing thought, and it was certainly appealing for me as a child. The only problem was I had absolutely no idea what my destiny was. So, of course, I went out and I searched for it, like I'm sure a lot of you have. And the search took me to, going to Arizona and hanging out with the Hopi and the Navajo Indian people and, seeing what they thought. And going to Esalen and Findhorn, the great spiritual schools. Doing hundreds and hundreds of courses, doing lots of my own personal healing and different kind of therapeutic things. And then I also followed my passion. And my very first passion was acting. So I went to New York and I studied with Uta Hagen. And that was a really big passion for me. And I loved rehearsing and I loved acting classes. But then one day I was on stage in a production and I was sitting there on stage and the audience was like watching, someone else was talking. And I was there having a bit of a quandary because I was kind of like, okay, so I'm going to be on a stage and I'm going to repeat the same thing over and over and over again. Not really me, I like new things. And then on top of that, I'm going to be saying somebody else's words, which I really had a lot of trouble remembering. So that wasn't really working for me. And then the final thing, I was like, and I'm going to listen to a director, and he's going to tell me, the freedom fanatic, the rebel, where to go, where to stand, what to say, and how to do it, how to act. I was like, I don't think so. I don't think this is really for me. So I stopped that, and I was really lost. I was like, man, I thought I knew what my purpose was. That was it. And then, no. So it's like, okay, it's all right. So I go into teaching. I didn't really want to be a teacher. It was a talent of mine. I had a talent for teaching, but it wasn't a passion. And I did that. I was really good at it. I got all these people into NIDA, and, I see my kids on the stage and, acting in front of Mel Gibson and stuff like that. So it was really cool. But I just didn't feel like it was really my passion. So then I discovered NLP, and I had this idea, man, I'm going to join personal development with acting personal transformation. I'm going to create a whole new kind of way of doing personal development. And I did NLP, and it was really cool. And then I kind of got, okay, this is the best way to teach it so people get the best transformations from it. And then I was like, all right, bored. Where's the creativity? I want some more creativity here. And I didn't feel like I could inject it. I was just wanting creativity for myself, not because that's what the audience needed me to say or do. And I was like, okay, well, I'll create my own techniques. So I then created matrix therapies, and people loved it, and it was really cool, and I really enjoyed it. And it went. People who I trained took it to England and Berlin and China and the United States, and that was really cool. And again, I was like, oh, this is fantastic for a few years. And then suddenly it was just like, I love it, I love to teach it, but it doesn't do it for me anymore, So then I got to create something more. And during all of this journey, I'd had a 20-year spiritual apprenticeship. And in that spiritual apprenticeship, it was in the Western mystery tradition, and it was all about archetypes. And so whilst I'm going on this search and thinking that I found the answer and then finding it wasn't really, I started to remember, the training that I'd had in archetypes. And it suddenly occurred to me that the spirit is, what would we say, infinite. It's infinite. How is it going to be satisfied by a career or a job or something I make or something I do? that if the soul has a quest for us, if it wants us to do something, then that quest is an archetypal quest. Because only an archetype can embody the infiniteness of the soul. It's only an archetype that can channel that. So in a moment I want to talk about what an archetype is, because the training I had in that is quite different from most people. But what I found is that when people do find something that they love, it's something archetypal in that gives them symbolic meaning, not the thing itself. And when they find that thing, then it doesn't mean that they're always happy. It doesn't mean that there's never any challenges. It doesn't mean that it's easy. But if they repress that or suppress that, then they really feel like they've got no energy, no drive, no nothing. And when they find that, they get this passion, they get this drive, and that drive sustains them through all the roadblocks. And that allows them to overcome the things that would normally prevent them. And that when they find that thing, it doesn't matter what they look like. It doesn't matter what their body is like. Because when they touch that aspect deep in their soul, there is a magnetic quality to them. There is a charisma to them that isn't dependent on anything else, but that they've found something deep inside that is unique and that they want to share that. So I want to talk a little bit, if it's okay, about what archetypes are, because there's a lot of information about archetypes out there, and a lot of it, I think it's great and I love it, but it's not what I think an archetype is. So is that okay if I share with you what I think an archetype is and how an archetype works? Yes! Thank you. Okay. So in the spiritual training that I had, a lot of that wisdom was very ancient, and a lot of ancient wisdom comes from Plato, and he got it through Pythagoras, who studied in Egypt, through the Hermes Trismegistus school. So there's a whole kind of lineage. And one of the things Plato said is that an archetype is a universal, symbolic ideal. So universal, doesn't matter what culture you come from, what country you come from, who you are, that there's something that something means to you that's symbolic. So Jung said it best when he said, if you got 100 people who had 100, and you gave them all a piece of paper, and you asked them to write down 100 different things about what a tree meant to them, then some of those things that they wrote down would be personal. Like for me personally, at my home when I was growing up, there was like this blossom tree. I don't know what it was. The blossoms came right down to the ground, and I used to crawl under there, and the light would be slightly tinged pink from the sunlight coming through the blossom trees. And I would just feel like, oh, here I am in a magical fairy bower. So if I was to write down something a tree means to me, it would be magical fairy bower. Does that make sense? It's personal to me and my experience. Then there would be cultural symbols. So if you're in Japan, one of the most famous trees, a cherry blossom tree. And what does it symbolise? The transience of life, that nothing's permanent. Enjoy the good times, but all the petals will fall, and then it'll be bare, and then it'll come back again. Yeah? Whereas if you were in England, a common tree is an oak tree, and it symbolises the permanence of life. So you can see that there's different cultural symbols. But no matter who it was, in one of their list of 100 things, everybody would write down that a tree is a symbol of life, the tree of life. It's a universal symbol, and that is an archetype. Does that make sense? So that's universal. It's symbolic. It has a meaning that a tree wouldn't necessarily have. It has a meaning we put onto it as human beings. And it's an ideal. And this is where I see archetypes as different from a lot of people, because a lot of people will talk about how the wounded child is an archetype. From what I understand, an archetype is an ideal. So child is an archetype. A wounded child is a shadow of that archetype. A magical child or a nature child is a subtype of the archetype. Does that all make sense? So we've got this child there. And then what is the ideal child? Or what is the ideal mother? Or what is the ideal father? And what Jung said is that we are born knowing what that ideal is, that it is innate to us when we're born. And I think this is a really interesting concept. So if I was to ask you, what is the ideal mother? What is the archetypal mother? Give me some idea what you think. Nurturing, beautiful. What else? In the ideal. Unconditional love, yes. What else? Protective, yeah, beautiful. Anything else? Forgiving, beautiful. Connected. Okay. Encouraging. So when we get, I had somebody said, bitch, that's what my kids think I am. And we can see that this is interesting because I think we are born with this idea of what our mother should be like. And then we compare what our real mother is like with the ideal. And the closer our real mother is to the ideal, the less negative emotions and problems we have with her. The further away she is from the ideal, the more negative emotions and beliefs we have, the more shadow we have. And I actually believe that all negative emotions and all beliefs are based on this disparity. So what that means is that if somebody's got a mother who's abusive and neglectful, they're going to have a lot of negative emotions around that. And then they're going to create a bunch of negative beliefs about themselves because they're going like this as a little child. They're going, I had this idea about what a mother should be like. I got born and my mother's nothing like that. There must be something wrong with me. I must be unworthy or undeserving, or there's something wrong with me, and that's why my mother's treating me like that. Does that make sense? I mean, it doesn't really make much logical sense, but I think it makes an emotional sense. Yeah. And so what we're really looking at in these archetypes, that we're all born with this innate concept of what these archetypes are. But one of the things that I really believe is that we're also born with certain archetypes that it's our soul's quest to fulfill. So I'd like to go through some of the archetypes. I'm going to go through the example of my archetypes, and you'll be able to see from my personal history quite clearly why some of those things didn't resonate for me, and how the closer I brought my career or what I did to the ideal of the archetypes that are my vision, my soul's vision for my life, the happier and more fulfilled I become. The further away my career is from those archetypes, the more angsty and unhappy I am about it. Does that make sense? And that one of the great things about knowing what your vision archetypes are is that, one, if you do, have to do a certain job for a certain reason, you can start to bring those archetypes into that job to make it closer to your ideals. Then, when you build up whatever you need to build up in order to change career, then you can move into a career that is more naturally like your archetypes. Does that make sense? Is this an interesting idea to you? I thought it was really cool. Okay, so I want to go through my vision archetype. So the first vision archetype that I have is the adventurer. Go out into the world, discover, wander the world, explore, pioneer new things. And it's got an innocence about it. Does that make sense? So I'd like everyone to stand up. And I'd like you to imagine that you're just stepping off. So just really lift your energy up like you're totally inspired and you're just stepping off into the unknown and you're excited about it. Okay? So you ready? Go. Imagine you're stepping off. Come on, guys! Where's my acting class? Okay, so you ready? Just take a step forward and imagine you're just stepping off into the unknown. Yay! Okay, cool. Sitting down. Can you feel the energy of that? When people don't have enough energy, it's because they're not inspired. One of the things about this archetype is in spirit. You can only venture forth with no cares in the world if you feel like you're invincible. Yeah? And it's that in spirit that is the word inspired that allows you just to step off like that. Wow. I'm going on an adventure. Who cares what the consequences are? I'm just going. Now, I'm not saying this archetype is for everyone, okay? And I'm not saying everybody has this vision archetype, but it's certainly like that for me. People will say, Pip, you're just fearless. And I go, I'm afraid of things, like being trapped, being told what to do. Yeah? So it's just that my fears sit in a different archetype, but not this one. This one feels normal and natural to me. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay, so my second archetype. So can you see why saying somebody else's lines, being told what to do by a director is not going to sit very well with me? Because it's all about freedom! Yeah? Woo! Okay, the next archetype for me is the magician. This is you draw energy down through your body and you manifest something magically here. If it's magical, can you hear that in my childhood dreams? You know, it's all about a magical world. It's all about, you know, finding that place. Talking to animals, whatever it is a magician. Yeah, you draw the energy down from up high. It channels through your body. And then, boom, there it is, and you can create it. And the process through which you create it, other people don't always understand. It's magic. Yeah, does that make sense? Is everyone standing up again? Do the magician. Is that cool? So lifting your hand up like this, you're drawing the energy down from whatever you believe it is, the universe, the spirit, whatever it is for you. And you can feel it channeling down through your body. And then you point and you focus and you concentrate, and it's that you're going to create. Not 100 possibilities, but that. And in that moment, there aren't 100 possibilities. There's a thing you focus on. Does that make sense? Coming and sitting down again. Now, the great thing about these archetypes is there's 22 of what I call the archetypes of consciousness. And even though we have the archetypes that are our genius, there are also these archetypes that are our weaknesses. And our role is to fulfill our genius, and our growth is filling up the archetypes that we're not so good at. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay, and I'll talk about those in a little moment. So the third one that I got here is the Empress. So I just get this chair to explain the Empress, because you've got to do this, and I hope those people at the front, I hope my skirt's long enough. Okay, so the Empress is the universal mother. The universal mother, she's the giver. So those women who find that they're constantly giving and never seem to receive, you might have a bit of this going on. Yeah? So it's giving birth all the time. Highly creative, giving birth to ideas all the time. Nurturing, love animals. She's a magical creature too, but it's all about earth magic. You know, it's all about the denizens in the trees and the animals and all of that kind of thing. Does that make sense? Now, there's lots of different subtypes to the Empress. For me, it's kind of like the whole Empress, but some people might have the artist or the musician. That's also the Empress. And it doesn't matter whether you're male or female. Does that make sense? We all have all 22 inside of us, and some of them are our purpose. Does that make sense? So this one, the Empress. So this one's good, you get to sit down. So just sitting down there, legs apart. Yeah, you're giving birth. Even you guys, you're giving birth, Charlie. You're not receiving, you're giving birth. And so you're giving out. You're giving out energy, you're giving out ideas, you're constantly giving out. Now, me in my life, this particular archetype just kind of took over. And then it became in shadow, the people pleaser, the one who was always giving but couldn't receive, the one who was overgiving. And it just burnt me out. It burnt my adrenals out. Did that make sense? And it went all into shadow. But when I was able to kind of like go, okay, I can transform this and bring my magician in. And when I came here and go, okay, I'm going on an adventure, stuff everybody, they can all look after themselves. I'm just going off, you know, and I'm going to go on an adventure where I can just be myself and just completely focus on myself, and there's no one's needs drawing at me. Does that make sense? And so I needed to bring these two back up so that I could heal what had happened to my Empress. Does that make sense? Yeah. And, you know, there's lots of things, lots of shadow things that it's important for us to heal within our archetypes, or in all of them. So I want to just talk a little bit about, you know, how I talked about Plato and his idea of the archetypes. I want to share with you a myth, and this myth is called the myth of And Plato wrote it, and he put it on the back of his book, The Republic. And this is the very first time that this idea that we've got a destiny, that is not a role, like, you know, you need to be a king, peasant, or a knight or whatever, but was actually something unique to you. It was the first time that it was talked about, that we've got recorded. Does that make sense? And a lot of New Agey stuff has picked it up and picked bits and pieces of it up, but doesn't tell it in its whole form. Does that make sense? And I've also pulled some bits from Platonius as well, because he also talks about this concept, and I've just drawn that into the myth. So is it okay if I share this myth with you and do a little storytelling? Okay. So once upon a time there was a prince, and the prince's name was And was in a battle, and in that battle he was mortally wounded and he died. But when he died, he was still conscious. And he went up into the sky, and he came to this place which was like a holding zone between the worlds, between this world and the next. And when he gets there, he arrives there, and he sees this angel. And he goes, "Whoa, what's going on? What's happening?" And the angel goes, "Well, you see those spirits coming up? They're all the people who have already died, most of them in your battle, thanks very much. And they're all going up. And they're all going to go back up, and they're going to learn what they learn and replay things from everybody else's point of view in their life. They're going to live their life again, but from everybody else that they had contact with. And then they're going to go up and they're going to learn that." And goes, "And what about those people there?" And the angel says, "Well, those guys, they're all coming down and they're going to be born. But before they get born, they go to the higher council. And in the higher council, they make some decisions. The first decision is, what is their purpose and destiny this lifetime? And then the second decision is, which parents do they need to be born to so that they can learn what they need to learn and gain the strength that they need to gain and have the hereditary that they need to have to fulfill that purpose? And then what are the 4 worst, most negative things that are going to happen in that person's life? And you know what? If you sit down and think about the most negative things that have happened in your life, there's really like 3 or 4. They might have got repeated numerous times. There's like 3 or 4. Like for me, it was the abuse, my father dying, you know, and some health issues. And then it's kind of like, does that make sense? If you chunk it big enough. And then what are the 4 most positive, wonderful things that are going to happen that are going to support this person in their life? And after they make those decisions, based specifically so that they can fulfill their purpose, then they go across these Elysian fields of forgetting. And just before they're born, they're assigned an angel. But this is no angel with fluffy wings and a cute Cupid smile. This is a fiery angel, and this angel has one purpose in the person's life, and that's it, and that is to make sure that that person fulfills their destiny. So this angel, when you're not anywhere near your destiny or not fulfilling your destiny, is going to make you feel like absolute crap. Okay? But if you are on track for your destiny, you still may get challenges because you might need them to learn what it is you need, to gain the resilience, to move forward. But each one of those things will feel like it's got a meaning, a reason, a purpose, and you'll feel driven to continue forward. And just before you're born, the angel with his fiery finger touches you right here and creates this indentation, so that when you're thinking, what is my purpose? Find yourself touching this part of your face. And so then you are born. And the interesting thing is that the Greeks called this angel the daemon. And during times when the Christians didn't, you know, the Catholic Church, I'm not saying about the spirit of Catholicism or the spirit of Christianity, but when it was like, you know, run by the Medicis and people like that who just wanted to have power and money, they didn't want people to have their own daemon. They wanted people to obey the rules of the church and the government. Yeah? And so they called the daemon the demon. When it was translated into Latin, the word became the genie. You were assigned a genie, and it's the root of the word genius. Your genie, the angel that's been assigned to you to help you fulfill your archetypal journey, is your genius. Or when you're a teenager, you don't know those questions are cliche. You don't know anyone's ever asked them before. Those questions are burning questions that you want an answer to. And I certainly know that for me in my childhood, feeling like there was something special about me and something special I was meant to offer the world, that was really important to me because that's what I held on to. That was what allowed me to feel like there was some point in what had happened to me, because by the time I was 9 years old, my world had spiraled into absolute emotional chaos because I'd had 4 years of abuse from a family friend, and then I'd gone through an extended court case where I had to give evidence against him whilst he was there in the courtroom, because in those days there wasn't any protection with kids, so you had to stand there in a courtroom and give evidence against. And then he made an appeal and I had to go back to the Supreme Court when I thought I'd finally escaped it all. And then only a short time after that, my father died. And my father was much older than my mother, 22 years older than my mother. They had a very passionate relationship that one day I might tell a story about. and you know, so my father retired and my mother went out to work, and my father was at home all the time for me when I came home. So I had this very, very close... So obviously I'm very excited and of course passionate to be talking about passion, purpose and power. And I imagine that you guys being here, you've probably already asked those questions like, what is my purpose in life? Why am I here? Do I have a destiny? And if I do have a destiny, how do I find it? And if I find it, how do I make it work for me so that it can bring in money and give me a lifestyle and so I can have it sustain through life? And those questions, you know, what's the meaning of life? Do I have a purpose? They're so common in our society that they're virtually cliche. But when you're a child... Thank you. I mean, it's wonderful to see so many people here who've found their purpose, and Nick, and you can see the enthusiasm and power that that brings with it. And of course, Leela as well. And all the people here in Soul Sessions, really supportive, and how Eloise brings together that beautiful community and really helps people. I think Eloise is a master at seeing people's genius and nurturing that into expression. So I really want to thank Eloise. She certainly helped me a lot. Relationship with him. And to me, I just didn't understand what was this all about. And then on top of that, I felt like I was very different. How many people here felt that? Feel like they're different. A lot of their life, they didn't feel like they fitted in. And they felt a bit like a fish out of water. Haha. Laughing down here. And for me, you know, I felt different because, one, my dad was so much older. Everyone thought he was my grandfather. My dad, who had been a brigadier general in the Second World War, he was born in India. He spent a lot of time with yogis. He was passionate about quantum